Hey, welcome to the third Cloud Custodian Day. Super excited to have everyone here. Um, we actually didn't do one last year because I think we in 2022 we did one like at the end of the year, so it didn't quite work out on time. But I wanted to walk through on some of the project updates and some of the things, some of the places that we'll be going. But of course, on where we're going, that's really up to everyone here as well as the contributors that we have. So before we go into sort of what's been done in the last year plus, I wanted to take a quick just sanity check overview. What is Cloud Custodian? And I know that for this audience, this might be a little remedial, but I just want to go over quickly because we can do so many things with Custodian. So the core of it is this rules engine for filtering resources, taking action on them, and using YAML DSL for that. And we can apply that on in an event-based mode to do that as things were happening in real time. We can apply that against infrastructure as code assets to apply policies before they're deployed. And we support a wide variety of clouds, AWS, Azure, GCP. Two recent new entries on this list are Oracle's Cloud and Tencent Cloud, and as well as Kubernetes, OpenStack, and Terraform. So who uses it? Well, lots of people. I think we have 420 some 23 contributors as of today. But on the usage side, we have thousands of organizations that are using Custodian in production. Here's just a smattering list of a few of them. But what do they use it for? So Custodian gets used for lots of different things. We've got a couple sessions today, I think, on FinOps in particular, but it's really trying to be that tool that can help you automate the enforcement of waste collection, off hours, enforcing lifecycle configuration. And it's really just designed to help you actually achieve and realize savings in this context. And then in the security context, it's about, again, doing enforcement of things, making sure all of your data is encrypted, making sure that none of your buckets are open to the world, and making sure that your IAM role, access is minimized to what's actually needed. So, and then finally, we also get used a lot for operations. So doing things like centralized backups, centralized logging, making sure that your limits are in place so that you don't hit them at runtime with your application. And so this sort of covers the broad set of use cases. Again, Custodian is agnostic, and we want to apply like an action like stop an instance for security response and or for off hours or for compliance purposes. So there's really just the level of things that you can do is really just bounded by what your needs are and what your imagination is. We support millions of different things and types of policies. So looking at the year plus, I guess it's been about 14 months since the last Custodian Day, and just breaking out with about 600 plus 630 pull requests merged. And that represents, I've got here sort of the breakout by provider, about 39% AWS, a dozen Azure, 10% GCP, some shift left. Some new providers. Also wanted to celebrate some of our new maintainers. Some of them you may not know because they live in other parts of the world that don't overlap on time zone as readily. Pratush Mishra from Capital One has been a contributor for a number of years, and I'm happy to announce that he is also now a maintainer. Kent is out in Australia, and he'll be presenting later today. And Tim Penny is in New Zealand and has been contributing regularly for a few years. So looking forward to seeing this list grow. And a community is only as strong as the number of people that are contributing to it. So thank you all. Looking at Amazon. So quickly going through the providers. Coming up with this list is kind of hard because there's like just you look at it, staring at a list of like 100 pull requests, and you're like, what does this actually summarize to? So we added about 50 new resources, 14 actions, 25 filters. That's across lots of different types of resources, additional capabilities that came up from AWS, keeping up with reInvent, Some of the highlights that we'll be talking about, that one of which we'll get a deeper dive later today, is our integration with the Cost Optimization Hub, which there's a session on in about 30 minutes. And then looking at, we now support AWS organizations. So before Custodian operated within an account, but now can actually operate on the org tree, do SCP management on it, and then integrating with IAM access analyzers to help minimize IAM roles within AWS. I also wanted to highlight that we have a separate AWS provider called using the Amazon Cloud Control API. One of the nice things around this is that it effectively gives us for free pretty much full coverage of anything that CloudFormation touches. And so the support just gives us all, like a lot of widespread capability and addressability across the full breadth of the Amazon provider. And this support comes with generic actions for deleting, updating resources as well. Moving on to GCP, we've added about 24 resources, a couple dozen filters, a dozen filters and some actions. GCP provider has been labeled as beta as partly as an homage to Gmail being in beta for 10 years, but I think that's time for that label to come off. It is GA. Probably the biggest highlight, I think, on GCP were the addition of the recommender filters. GCP does a degree of machine learning here to do cost optimization, IAM minification, and we're now able to expose that directly against those resources so that you can find those things and take action on them when they have extant recommendations available. Azure, a lot of fleshing out on the different Azure resources, primarily around the databases, making sure that we have WAF filters for everything, security audit settings, configuration settings around resources. And then as a general theme, going along with AWS Cost Optimization Hub and GCP recommenders, is the ability to use Azure Advisor recommendations as a filter on resources to know when to take action on them, as well as what things can be optimized. Switching tracks, one that we've been really excited about that came out really, I think December 22 is when this effort first started getting going, is we have Cloud Custodian policies for infrastructure as code in the form of Terraform. The syntax, the capability and semantics that are exposed here are a little bit richer than some of our cloud policies because we're operating against an in-memory graph. But the first thing is that you can do multi-resource policies, that we have native policy testing, that you can do arbitrary traversal from any resource to any other connected resource through multiple hubs. We directly integrate with code hosting platforms like GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps, etc. So on the right-hand side, I've got a policy here that will do tag governance across multiple cloud resources, across all the AWS, Google, and Azure Terraform assets, make sure that the resource is taggable, and then validate that it flags if any of the 3 required tags for our tag policy are absent. So single policy for multi-cloud tag governance. Switching out to some of our new providers, shout out to Oracle for contributing an OCI provider. This covers some core compute network capabilities, as well as common filters and actions, metrics filters, being able to stop an instance, remove it, tag it. And there's a PR up right now for adding event-based support so that you can do this as those resources are being created to enforce policy. Next up is Tencent Cloud, also contributed by Tencent. Shout out and thanks. This covers some of the core resources for IAM, compute, storage, databases, and allows for you to do tag policy governance against those resources as well. So going out to our status in the CNCF, Cloud Custodian is an incubating project. We have thousands of production users. And so walking our way through the process of getting to graduated, I'm hoping we will do by KubeCon US sometime second half of the year, Q3, Q4. And we've done the biggest, I think, item on the to-do list there was getting our independent security audit done. And now we're sort of working through the rest of graduation requirements and talking to trying to find our talk sponsor for the graduation process. On the release engineering, we have been continuing to work at automating and signing our releases. All of our Docker images are signed. Our release artifacts are all generated straight out of CI. And so continuing to look at working with OpenSSF and the SALSA criteria to get to SALSA level 3, which is effectively no humans in the loop on releases, is really our target goal. And as well as being testable and verifiable. All right. Looking forward to 2024 and beyond. As part of the AWS CC provider, also want to provide a CloudFormation hook support. This allows a sort of a centralized preventative mode. It's not quite the same as shift left in the sense that shift left can really take place on the developed workstation or in CI, whereas CloudFormation hooks are sort of a deployment, a final pre-deployment centralized integration, but they still allow for that sort of preventative pre-deployment validation of resources. And then as we've looked, we'll talk about this in a separate talk, but fleshing out some of our support on the recommenders to be able to directly take the recommended action for them. So automatically resize, just automatically stop a resource, and they all have that sort of automatically flow. Azure has deprecated the serverless runtime that we're currently using, the V3 of their serverless runtime. They're on V4 now, and so we will need to do some work to update that. I think one of the biggest things about helping grow communities is making sure we have great docs. And so we've added a lot of capabilities over the last year and a half, and we think it's time to sort of come back to looking at how do we improve that onboarding experience for new users, better tutorials, website revamp, starting to get intro videos there. And so that will be the focus for a Cloud Custodian sprint at PyCon in 2024 in Pittsburgh. We did this maybe a few years ago, but we'd like to resurrect it and have an on-site working environment for people to collaborate in real time, face-to-face. If the folks aren't familiar with sprints in the open source context, or in this context, it's really about sort of organizing the tail end of the conference such that we can they create a space for people to get together on laptops around desks and work together on any common features that they want for a given project. And then finally, we've been doing direct integration with the cloud providers on logs, metrics, tracing. Some of the features we've added have actually been able to disable some of the metrics due to cost considerations around large volumes. But as part of sort of simplifying that, we'd also like to add in OpenTelemetry integration as a fellow CNCF project, but also as something that gives users and deployers the flexibility to plug in their metric stores and art alerting of choice. And that's all I had. So thank you. And I will pass the mic back to our MC, Umair.
Woohoo. Thanks, Kapil. I bet there's going to be a lot of questions for this one. So any timeline, I'm going to start reading the questions. Any timeline on the CloudFormation hook support?
I'm hoping that will all happen relatively soon in Q1. I know Pratyush had been looking at it, and we have some prior PR work. I think we went down a rabbit hole of trying to write our own SDK instead of using the existing one due to some of the cryptography requirements that they were carrying. But that has since been ameliorated in the upstream SDK. So that should be relatively lightweight, and looking forward to getting that in Q1.
Great. And Pratish and AJ and others, if you want to jump in anytime, like this is a maintainer Q&A, so feel free to add thoughts. Another question that came in was, where's the best place to find GCP policies examples?
In the docs. So most of the providers have a doc section which has examples. And of course, improvements to the docs are always welcome. That's one of the reasons we're calling it out here for something to improve on in 2024 is to sort of get those more fleshed out and get that into a simpler onboarding experience. There are there are third-party repos on GitHub for different policy packs and examples. I think the challenge that I think I've commented on this is that historically the challenge has really been when we get to the remediation side of things that you really have to take advantage. You still have to customize to org-specific behaviors, your exception list, which environments you want to take those particular actions in. So that's why we tend to look at them as sort of examples for you to customize to your particular needs.
They're great. And
And AWS CC is as a separate provider, primarily because the attributes are changed. The cloud control, which is what AWS CC is based on, is effectively the exposing the CRUD layer that CloudFormation itself has. So the attributes there correlate to what CloudFormation itself has versus what the service typically does as described. So there's slightly different attributes than what you typically see with the standard AWS provider, and that's why it's structured as a separate provider.
okay, great. Any more questions for Kapil? This is a great chance to talk about Cloud Custodian, and I would just throw a general question out there for everybody. What's the one thing you want to be added to Cloud Custodian? Like
And
what's
please stop GitHub issues, because this may not be tracked here.
No, I can always save the chat and afterwards, but that would be cool to see. What's the one thing that everybody individually here would like to see in Cloud Custodian? And any other questions for Kapil?
Hey, real quick, Kapil. So the CloudFormation hook support, is that going to use the same attribute set as the regular AWS provider, or is it going to be cloud control provider attribute?
It would be specific to AWS CC, so it would be using those attributes because that's what gets exposed in the hook. So yeah, it's very much CloudFormation specific syntax. So it would be specific to the AWS CC provider.
Yeah,
there's also, I think, some possibility like for us to use to actually move some of the to also bring some of the CloudTrail event modes to the AWS CC provider as well. So those are sort of two different things that targeting towards that provider, those two execution modes, both CloudTrail and hook and a CFN hook mode.
Has anybody looked into something that would translate existing AWS provider policies into the CC format?
It's not viable. Like it's like a completely different attribute space. Like there's no way to normalize it across the two. Like yeah, there's too much variation. Even doing like Levin distance checks on individual keys, there's too much chance for error on any automated translation there.
Yeah, all right. I'll complain to my AWS TAM, but I know it won't
I don't know.
help
So
at all.
yeah, I say that, and I also realized that there is yeah, I don't know if it can work in policy land because we use JMES path, but I do know that they recently released maybe last Friday some new capability around being able to export existing resources into CFN or CDK, but I'm not sure how reliable that is, and I don't know that it would work in the same way in terms of policy translation either. So definitely an area to explore, but the initial thought would be it looks like MP hard, let's say.
Oh, I know there's a question by Jimmy Ray as well. Lots of question there. He talked about when I looked at the Kubernetes support, it looks like mutating hooks only. Has that or will that change?
So Kubernetes support for Custodian supports a few different things. You can run on the policies in poll-based mode. You can also run as both a mutating or validating emission controller. So effectively, those are the three different forms that we would expect to see from integration with Kubernetes. validating, mutating emission controllers, and then poll based. Is there something else that's more specific that you're referencing as far as what you see there?
Well, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So when I was, writing that chapter from the book I'm writing, and when I looked at what was being created inside Kubernetes, I saw mutating webhooks being created, but I never saw validating webhooks being created, even though validating use cases were being done. And so my initial concern there, and if it's there and I missed it, then I'll be happy to rewrite that chapter. But my initial concern there was how mutating, hooks are basically processed serially because they are mutating things, and how validating webhooks are processed in parallel. And because of that serial processing with mutating, you have a very limited time before the API server says, all right, I give up, sending it back. So maybe I missed something. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to sit down with somebody and take a look at this a lot, closer. But what I saw didn't create the right objects. I didn't see validating webhooks being created.
Yeah, I mean, the intent is that the validation mode should be doing a validating a emission controller, and if it's not, then definitely feel free to file a GitHub issue, because that looks like, if that is the case, then that is an oversight. But the intent was that a validating execution mode would create a validating emission controller.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.